In what looks like a pose by terrorists, bandits and kidnappers, the last few months before the elections had been peaceful. But the country in the last few days has been witnessing again a wave of attacks with casualties. What's responsible for this sudden rise in attacks again just after the elections? Security analyst Isaac Onoja is here to help us answer these questions and more. And from our Roadside studio, we have Arise analyst Frank Tietie. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us, gentlemen.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Good evening. Thank you for coming. Now, let's start with you. Before the elections, we saw that there was a reduction in the spate of insecurity, except for pockets of attacks here and there that were majorly politically motivated. Now, after the elections, the attacks, insecurity, and of course, the clashes between herdsmen and farmers and what have you have increased. Are we going to still link this to political developments, or what has changed?
Of course, it's going to be on the security and the political development of the country that we all find ourselves in. Interests have always, been the problems when it comes to security. We have not been intentional fighting for, way forward in fighting insecurity. Then when I ask a question, what kind of insecurity are we fighting? We must ask ourselves, what kind of insecurity are we looking at? When you are sick or when you have maybe headache, you look for Panadol, or you have some problems to see how to get a particular drugs to solve the problems. Now, the question here is, what kind of insecurity are we fighting here? Let me take you back to Benue State, where the governor was just crying. You see, when they want to get to government house, they promise you that one thing they're going to do is security of lives and properties. When the governor wants to get his re-election or want to go into the Senate, he does not call on the president. He makes sure that he gets everything he needed to win the power. So when it comes to security, why do we shift the goalpost from the local level to the state level now or to the federal level? Do we call on Mr. President when we want to get our nomination funds? Do we call on the president when we want to get money to, to ensure that we get into power? These are the questions we begin to ask ourselves. So our governors have not been intentional in fighting when it comes to security. When it comes to security, they have not been intentional to getting the results. So the problems we are having here is we don't have any countermeasures in grants to fight or to checkmate the situations of what we have in the neighboring villages of Benue State today. There is no boundary security. There's no formidable force to fight what we call the headers. And you cannot just have a situations maybe one or two times and you say it is all about headers. You must have a definite definition of those that are fighting you. If you have one or two in your custody, they should be able to give you the link of how they came in. How long do we continue to tag Benue insecurity to headers?
But this particular one has been directed to herders. Herders have been fingered in this particular one. So what do you say to that?
In my candid opinion, when it comes to security, it has no definition of whether it is herders. It has no definition when it comes to is an Hausa or a Fulani or a Yoruba man. When it comes to insecurity, they must have a definite description of the kind of insecurity they're having. If it is herders or farmers clashes that they're having, it is not farming season yet. We're not in the farm now. You cannot tell us that it is because they find themselves in the farm that they're fighting. So what kind of insecurity are they fighting in Benue? Right. It is not about herders.
Okay. Well, Isaac, you say it should be defined to know exactly who is perpetrating this evil act. I would like you to actually give us who you think should actually come up with this definition, but that would come after we get a response from Frank Tietie. Well, Frank Tietie, Isaac here has said, you know what? The chief security officers of the state, speaking about the governors, they can no longer just blame the government at the federal level, that they can, take responsibility more or less in terms of dealing with the insecurity in their state. So in your opinion, do you agree with him? And if your answer is yes, what really can governors and other local leaders, really do to stem the tide of insecurity, which is currently ravaging almost every part of the nation?
Well, I cannot agree with him. Well, his position is far from reality. The law of responsibility demands that to whom much is given, much is expected. If there is a federal government that is in charge of the army, in charge of the police, in charge of the state security service, in charge of gathering everything about security, in charge of even granting licenses to own small arms and all forms of weapons, you don't now come to hold the governor who merely has a tag of a chief security officer that is not even constitutional, but simply, if you look at the provisions of the Constitution with regards to the control of the police, the governor simply sits there. If he suggests, not an order, he gives a suggestion to the commissioner of police, who will now call Abuja to say, the such and such governor has asked me to do this. Should I go ahead? Before it's the IG that will tell him to go ahead before he does that. So as a matter of responsibility, it's not the governors that are responsible for providing security. Yes, they should be responsible, because when you give people a political mandate, they should be able to discharge it to the extent of providing the basic reason why government exists, that is to protect life, property, and life and property, and to also ensure the welfare of the citizens. Unfortunately, we have a very deceptive system, self-deceptive system in Nigeria, where we say we run a federation. We run a federal government and state government, whereas the state governments don't have the instruments to discharge the responsibility in a federation. That is a very sad reality. If you look at the way insecurity has grown in geometric measures in this country, we haven't seen that commensurate, increase in terms of innovation on the part of government in forging ways to, tackle insecurity. We still dwell in a situation where a government, particularly federal government, is stuck with political correctness. All forms of criticisms are viewed from the prism of political interest. These things are factual. We are yet to manage our identity, national identity, in such a manner that we can determine those who are Nigerians and those who are not. We cannot say that fingerprints technology has been maximized in the fight against security. We see a lot of irresponsibility on the part of those who actually hold the task of providing security in this country. We cannot continue to shirk this responsibility by not saying that governors are not doing anything, when in fact, as a matter of fact, they cannot do anything. So you ask me to suggest what governors can do. I think they've been crying in such helpless manner to the president. That's the only thing they can do. Well, and the president seems to have done his best, because I can understand with him. He underestimated the insecurity situation the country was facing in 2015. And in the somewhat almost past 7 years, it's been quite intractable. Mr. President will say he has done his best, but his best certainly has not been good enough for this country. We are suffering in the doldrums of insecurity. And unfortunately, the international community is leaving us all alone. They are somewhat, interested in helping us to have a smooth democracy, but forgetting that democracy rests seriously on the fact that there is a secure Nigeria. So how much support have we received from the international community? How much investments have we received? We keep receiving investments that look like forms of trying to take our resources. We all know that this insecurity, particularly in Benue, has an international dimension. We know of the land grab agenda that is going on. We see the helplessness the Benue people are facing. Yet this country pretends as if it's buried its head as an ostrich in the sand. And that's why it keeps creeping. It started from the northeast, and now it's going on across the entire country. Nowhere is safe. Northwest, southwest, south-south. And then we keep paying lip service to the fact that when new security arrangements are coming up, whether it's a Bibiago or Motekun, what you get is, rather than coming together with a concerted resolve on the part of everybody who is a stakeholder in this country, to say, first, let us define our Nigerianness and determine the purpose of this country. But we just allow
Tietie.
Political and ethnic rivalry to tear us apart, and then they are taking these bandits and kidnappers and insurgents are taking advantage of this. We must have a country first before all of this talk about ethnic rivalries, democracy.
Having a country first and thinking about our Nigerian nurses, what Frank Tietie is saying, but he doesn't agree that the state governors have enough power. Even if we're seeing Samuel Otom, speak to the president and say, beyond directive, you need to give matching orders, which some would argue that in the past the president has given those, but the result, well, Isaac Onoja, you had made a point earlier where you spoke about the fact that, we need to be clear with regards to who's perpetuating this evil. And I asked you earlier, so who do you think should come up with this definition, since you disagree with the governor who is on ground and say what we're experiencing is more of the herders trying to kill the farmers, or the other way around?
Like I said, we are not fully in the farming season yet to actually say that they have a clash in the farm or something. The coordinated attack of just recent days, the one that even happened that claimed the lives of the Otoko local government chairman's son, have not been in the farmyard. It happened in the locality, it happened in the society, and up till now we have not been able to at least arrest one or two to confirm these are headers or where they came from. Anybody as well could have dressed or would have carried their machetes to say they are headers. I agreed with you. Like my brother mentioned, he talked about the responsibilities of government, and I said in my opening remarks that we cannot say it is all about the federal government yet, because we have the state, we have the local government, we have the state, and we have the federal government, and we don't have the state government crying to the federal government when they want to get power. Why is it that when they have gotten this power, the excuse to why they cannot protect the lives and properties of the people is because the federal government cannot protect them? Now, I understand that one of the problems we have is because of our over-centralized security system. That before you have to do anything, the Oga at the top, the Inspector General of Police, must give order to the Commissioner of Police. And it's for this reason that some of us have clamored that it is time for us to have the State Security Service, which we now will talk about the state policing. For us to have an integrated state policing at this moment, do we now talk about the regional security? Can we solve a conventional insecurity problem with a regional security situation? The answer is no. Okay, if that is the answer, why is it still having problem in Benue State when Benue State have the lifeguards?
Okay, now
they haven't been able to solve the problem. So you cannot solve a conventional insecurity problem with a regional security solution until we begin to get it from the top. But while we are doing that, the state government must complement the federal government to ensure that they get results. If they have been able to arrest one or two persons in connection with the last attack, and they have proof, proofs of these are headers, then the federal government cannot deny. You cannot have up to like 2 or 3 people come to a place, a coordinated attack that will going to affect almost 30-70 lives, and no single person is being arrested. It further tells you that this is an internal issue. So let me tell you something. What is eating the beans lives in the beans.
Okay, now what Isaac is saying, Isaac Onoja is saying that regional and grassroots security apparatus needs to be beefed up. As against what Frank Tietie has been saying. Frank Tietie is pushing it back to the doorstep of the federal government. We're not absorbing the federal government here, but in the British colonial era, they had this system of Bertie, they called it Bertie, where the farmers, herders, and the local authorities had an agreement, and they were able to minimize conflict at that time. This collapsed in the 1970s. Frank, how can we go back to this kind of system where the local authorities, the farmers and the herders will come to an agreement?
Countries of this world are making progress. They are making innovations. They are applying technology. They are embracing progressive methods of farming and integration of agriculture into modern life. We cannot be talking about the colonial Nigeria. In fact, it is shameful that under colonial Nigeria, under the native authority system, there was better security in the entire Nigeria. The reason is that the colonial government, and again, I emphasize that it is shameful that I am making reference to a better colonial Nigeria than a present Nigeria, an independent Nigeria, 6 years after that threw itself into the conflict of a civil war, a coup and then a civil war, and eventually it has not recovered since then. A country that has perpetually been on its knees as if it was truly not, ripe to have its independence under the tutelage of the colonial masters. So, but if I answer your question directly, A government should take responsibility for the fact that it provides security irrespective of anybody who wants to cause mayhem. So it cannot be pushed to anybody except that of the government, in this case, the person who controls force. When we talk about force, who controls arms, ammunition, who controls its deployment, and that's the federal government, only the federal government. So I emphasize that federal government is failing, and we hope that the new government that is coming will be truthful to itself when it talked about the idea of state policing. That's the only thing. Imagine we borrowed democracy from the United States, but only borrowed the fact that only the nomenclature without the real operational practice of democracy and a federal system, federal presidential system of government, as we said to have borrowed from the United States. In this particular situation, we cannot be thinking of going back to old routes of grazing routes, for example, as the president once mooted. He knew that that was unworkable, impracticable. It cannot be done. But what should happen is this: define who is a Nigerian. Define the essence of having the various states, federating states, the states that make up the union called Nigeria. Let these states be able to determine their destinies. That's the whole essence. It shouldn't have changed, even when we had 3 regions, then 4 regions that then proliferated to 12, 19, and then the current 36. The principle is that these components, geographical areas manned by political authorities in the person of a governor and then the State House of Assembly, together with its own peculiar judiciary, should be able to determine their destiny. In this case, take Benue, for example, and any other state. Benue is a helpless state with a helpless governor that cannot do anything. And then you are now suggesting...
Harsh words there. You can't say he is helpless and the people are helpless as well.
Oh no, you don't argue with me. It is a matter of fact. If he's not helpless, can he protect his people? Look at them being killed like chickens every day. And then we now have a new normal. People just die and then we sit comfortably in Abuja. Very soon Abuja will no longer be comfortable. You think it's a matter...
The issue of insecurity has to be nipped in the bud and as soon as possible. But a good place for us to drop the anchor and to say thank you so much, gentlemen, for your in-depth analysis tonight. Hopefully we'll see an end to insecurity soon. Frank Tietie, Arise News analyst, thank you for joining us, as well as security analyst, that's Isaac Onoja. Gentlemen, thank you for being here.